Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here. I hope you're having a great day and I hope this video can make it a little bit better. Today we're going to be diving deep into Swain with his guide. As you see, we have him at level 30, fully at 6 stars, and had a blast playing him. He's been a great addition to the game, so let's just jump right in. So up first, let's look at Swain himself as his card. 5 cost Noxus, 3/6 as far as the stat line. So he has Fearsome and Nexus Strike, that'll be important later. Deal 3 to the enemy Nexus, so a great way to do some extra damage. And then his level up condition is you've dealt 14 non-combat damage. So combat is just when you are attacking or blocking. That is going to be the combat damage. So this is going to be anything outside of that. So anything you're doing hitting the enemy Nexus, spells, skills, this Nexus Strike effect, all of that is going to count as out of combat damage. So level up condition of getting 14 of that. You'll be able to level him up actually pretty quickly. And also for his stat line, he is fairly close to Titanic. So with a little bit of work, you can get him there, which can be good for some certain items or relics, such as Starforged Gauntlets. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. When he does level, he then goes to a 4/7. He gets Overwhelm, really good for making sure you get that Nexus Strike effect. Because even if you attack and hit someone that is blocking you, if you have enough damage to still go through them and hit the Nexus, you'll still proc your Nexus Strike effect. So that Overwhelm, really good. And now when you deal non-combat damage, so again, all those spells and skills and stuff like that, you stun the strongest back row enemy. Now, what this means is the strongest enemy that is not currently attacking or blocking. So again, focusing on that out of combat damage. So if, for example, you would cast a spell and hit the Nexus while is already combat, you're not going to stun someone that is attacking you. You're only going to stun someone that is left on their board. Still, though, this is really good. With the amount of Nexus damage you're able to bring out, you can have crazy control once you get Swain leveled. Now, his Nexus Strike effect also is improved. So now it's deal 3 to all enemies and the enemy Nexus. So if Swain can actually hit the Nexus when he's leveled, he's able to do massive damage. Now, note that this is not a skill. This is just kind of a effect that's going off. So this doesn't benefit from any modifiers that increase skill damage. This Nexus Strike effect, not a skill. For his champion spell, really great card. 1 cost, Ravenous Flock, fast speed, deal 4 to a unit if it's damaged or stunned. It's a very cheap card, great for dealing massive damage, but you do have to have that little caveat of the unit needs to be damaged or stunned. But that'll be pretty easy for you to achieve, so you can use this very often. Having extra copies of Swain in your deck so you're playing this champion spell feels really great. And then since this is his champion spell, it's also creating a copy in your deck. All right, let's go take a look at his Constellation, especially focusing on those first 3 star powers. So here's the Swain's Constellation overall, but let's just look at the powers here. So up first, your first spell or skill each round deals 1 extra damage for each 5 health the enemy Nexus is missing. So this is a very interesting star power. For one, it deals nothing at the start of the game because the enemy is not missing any health. So it doesn't really activate until you can at least get 5 health off of the enemy. But increasing your first spell or skill, increasing that damage, really good. And this is just going to deal more and more damage the longer the game goes on or the weaker the enemy gets. This is also something that will really scale into the tougher adventures. So if you're going up against like Lysandra or the new Swain adventure, where their Nexus health can get pretty insane, like 99 Nexus health, the longer that game goes on, the more damage you're dealing to the Nexus, the stronger and stronger you get, which is very fun. For his second star power, really good. +1 starting mana. When a unit dies, so your unit or the enemy unit, just any unit dies, deal 1 to the enemy Nexus. This is fantastic, gives you a lot of burn damage, great way to reduce down the enemy Nexus's health to improve your other star powers. And this opens up a very interesting play pattern for you, because not only can you focus on killing the enemy units to proc this, but you're also totally fine with sacrificing your own units to also get this. So trying to pair up with some units that are very expendable, like ephemeral units, actually feels fantastic for Swain. Really fun second star power that just gives you so many different ways to play. I absolutely love it. For the third star power, your first 3 spells or skills each round deal 1 extra health. So same thing as the first one, it's just now your first 3 instead of your first 1. Pretty good. But other than increasing the quantity, it's not really changing at all how this works. Very good set of star powers. In my opinion, Swain feels amazing as soon as you start playing him, at least when you have the first 2 star powers. Now, for the 4th star power, he's able to get, when you damage the enemy nexus, grant the top ally in your deck 1/1. This is actually fantastic. You're damaging the enemy nexus so many times that this is helping scale your units quite heavily. Now, it is just the units that are at the top of your deck, so you do have to draw units. It's going to be a little bit random, but as matches go on, you just get stronger and stronger, because not only are your spells increasing in damage, but also you're getting these giant units. And with Swain, you have a lot of cheap units, so quite often you'll drop a 1 or a 2 drop that ends up being like a 20/20 because of how much damage you've dealt to the enemy nexus. So this is actually a very solid power, great to have. Mana flow, simple, straightforward, get an extra mana gem. And then Demonic Ascension, when you damage an enemy with a spell or skill, deal the same amount to all other enemies as well. This is incredible, so much fun, a lot of different ways you can play around with this. It turns essentially all of your single target spells into an AoE spell, just hitting the whole enemy board. This also makes your AoE spells incredible because it's dealing damage to the enemy board for each instance of damage. So like for Avalanche, it's dealing 2 to all the enemy units. It's not only hitting 1 unit for 2 damage, it's then hitting all of the other ones for each instance of that damage. So the more units the enemy has for your AoE spells, quite often the more damage they're actually able to take. This is incredibly fun. A lot of different ways you can use this, especially you can go around Spell Shield, essentially, because you can hit one person that doesn't have Spell Shield with a spell, and then the damage will then go and hit all the other units as well. Very fun, really changes up how you can play. Absolutely fantastic power. Super fun, and the most interesting 6-star I've played with so far, although it's not up against that much competition because I only have like 3 total. Anyways, moving on to some of the other star powers, or not star powers, bonus stars you can get. So 10 Nexus health and 100 gold. Really nice, especially if you're taking Swain into the Swain adventure, because Nexus health is very important there. Star of Legends, your support champs have Focusing Crystal. This is fine. You are playing a decent amount of spells, so getting some scaling for your support champions, decent. Enraged Fire Spitter gets Nomad's Medallion. Also solid. This is really strong card. Being able to play it for a 4 cost is nice, especially once you're able to get to 6 stars, because this is then not only damaging the entire enemy board and the enemy nexus, so very strong right there. And then one of the most important, or the most important, spells you acquire in adventures have Pyromantic Wake. Deal 3 to the enemy nexus. Now this is a very interesting interaction with your star powers. While this deals 3 damage baseline, its damage is actually increased by your 1 and 3 star. So while this is increasing the damage of your spells and skills, it's also increasing your Pyromantic Wake. So this is going to just deal more and more damage to the enemy nexus the longer the match goes on and the more damage you do. And since this is dealing damage straight to the nexus, its damage being increased is then just making the next spell you play do even more damage. So very fun, and one of the upgrades you really want to shoot for. Next then, Pirouette has Yordle Portal. Pretty good, manifesting a card from your regions. You do somewhat struggle with card draw or card generation, so having some more here is pretty good. And then these are all of the gem ones, which gonna take a very long time to be able to get. Support cards have an additional item, additional chance to find epic items and powers, additional chance to find legendary powers, increase starting gold for all Noxus, and increase XP for all Noxian champions. But these won't matter too much. Let's go take a look at what path you probably want to go for the Swain Constellation. So here you start off with your first 3 star powers, then you go up, you get your Star of Bounty, so 10 Nexus health and 100 gold. Really nice. Now from here you have a split. You could go over here and get your support champs to have Focusing Crystal. I don't think that's really worth it. This is probably an upgrade you want to hold off until the very end, so I wouldn't bother grabbing this. You want to head over here, get your 4th star power, because this will help you out a lot, and then come up 1 to get the Pyromantic Wake on all the spells you acquire in adventures. So this is any spells you pick up from like shops, after battle rewards, or support champs. Any spells they have will also have this Pyromantic Wake. This is fantastic and really what you want to be shooting for Swain. All the other upgrades, while they're fine, they're not as impactful other than like the 6 star. So really for Swain, come up, grab these 3, and then just grab these 3 nodes right here. So it will take a decent amount of Swain fragments, But as far as like the star crystals, you'll just need it for your raiding party, which just takes 10. So it's actually pretty easy to get Swain powered up in his constellation. From here, you would want to head up to get the Enraged Fire Spitter, has the Nomad's Medallion. That way you can come over, get your 6-star if you ever get the Noxus Nova Crystal, or then you can come down and get your 5-star. Now, the last upgrade over here, Pirouette has Yordle Portal. Nice, but not as impactful as many of the others. Again, go ahead and grab your first 3, come up for the Star of Bounty, get your 4th star, and then get your Star of Discovery. After that, don't really prioritize Swain. He's going to feel fantastic just with this here. All the other upgrades, while they're nice, they won't have as big of an impact on how you're playing. That being said, while I do really enjoy Swain's constellation, I think he's perfectly fine with just the intro star powers. So while he does feel better when you get some of these upgrades, don't feel like Swain is unplayable without them. All right, let's take a look at your starting deck now. So up first, we have Legion Saboteur. This is able to get that Shadow Totem. So when I'm summoned, summon an ephemeral copy of me. Attack, this is a skill. Deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So a great way to deal more damage to the enemy nexus. Trigger your out of combat damage for Swain. But also, this damage is able to scale from your star powers. So this can potentially do a ton of damage to the enemy nexus later on in the game. Also, very cheap unit. This can potentially get buffed up by your raiding party. You can drop like a 1-drop that has crazy amounts of stats, and since this Shadow Totem is a exact copy, that ephemeral copy, will also have all of those stats. So very solid right here. Next up, we have Death's Hand. So 2 costs with that Mana Potion and Elixir of Skill, draw 1. Really good because you do struggle with draw sometimes with Swain, especially starting out. And this deal 2 to the enemy and 1 to the enemy nexus. Very solid card, giving you some good removal. Also damage on the nexus, and both parts of this are increased by your star powers. So as your spells get stronger, both the damage to the enemy and the damage to the enemy nexus is able to scale up, which is really nice because this can then just help you get more damage on the enemy nexus to further increase all of your damage in the future. Next up, we have House Spider. So when I'm summoned, summon a Spiderling. Has that Coral Crush Gauntlet, so +1 and Brash. Not that big of an upgrade, but this is actually a solid card. Just being able to drop 2 blockers for a little bit of defensive positioning is pretty nice to have. So the House Spider, while it doesn't have a spell or a skill, still feels pretty good in this deck. The Gauntlets, not that big of a deal, but still actually a pretty good addition here. Next up then, we have the Spell Slinger. So 2 cost, 3/3 because of that Phage. With play, stun an enemy, or if it's already stunned, deal 2 damage to it. This is a skill, so again, this will be increasing in damage with your star powers. So pretty good, giving you some more control or some removal. Moving on, then we have the Arachnoid Sentry. When I'm summoned, draw 1. Again, great for mitigating that weakness of having a lack of draw. We also get that Studded Leather for 1/1. Play, stun an enemy, again a skill, but this doesn't have any damage component to it, so it's not going to benefit from your star powers, but just giving you some more control. Next up then, we have Iron Legionary. Now this one is actually fantastic. So 3 cost, 6/4 with that Savage Shield, so massive stats on this unit. But play, deal 3 to an ally to deal 3 to an enemy. Now, both parts of this damage is going to be increased by Swain star power, so the damage to your unit and the damage to the enemy unit. But remember, if you kill your own unit, you trigger your 2nd star power to deal damage to the enemy nexus. So killing your own unit here is not bad. That's another reason why both the Shadow Totem for the Legion Saboteur and the House Spider summoning the Spiderling is pretty good. Having some extra fodder units to kill, not bad. But the great thing about this is both parts of that damage count for Swain's level up. So baseline, just by playing this, since you're dealing 3 to an ally and 3 to an enemy, you're contributing 6 damage to Swain's level up. Now his level up condition is 14 damage, so you're almost doing half of the damage by playing 1 card. This one's absolutely fantastic, and other spells you can get that deal damage to your units and enemy units, all of that damage is going to contribute to leveling up Swain. This card is absolutely fantastic. Next up then, we have Pirouette. This is normally slow, but goes up to burst with that stopwatch we get later. So 3 costs, but plunder, I cost 2 less, so this can normally be a 1 cost when you're playing this. Deal 1 to anything, and stun an enemy. So if you want, you can use this to hit the enemy nexus for some extra damage, great for just going straight to face and doing as much damage as possible, and also going to give you some control. Really solid card here. Then we have Swain at 5 and the Enraged Fire Spitter, but this can go down to a 4 cost with your Constellation. So 5/3 Challenger, also has that Overwhelm, play, deal 2 to the enemy and the enemy Nexus. Really good for just, again, further getting rid of enemy units, damaging the enemy Nexus, and again, both parts of this damage is increased by your star powers. So overall, a very well put together deck as far as gameplay. Now, a lot of these cards, almost all of them, we have seen in other decks. So that slight aspect of it does bother me a little bit, but the deck plays so well that for me, I'm able to overlook it. When I first saw it, wasn't that thrilled just because of how many times we've seen all these cards before. But the deck actually plays fantastic. It is very well put together. Now let's glance over what level breakpoints you get some of these upgrades. So up first, your Death's Hand gets a mana potion. Great upgrade to get immediately. Your Enraged Fire Spitter gets Great Club. It's fine, not that impactful. Arachnoid Sentry gets Philosopher's Stone. This is good because you do struggle with draw, so having some draw fairly early on is helpful. At 9, your Pirouette gets Stopwatch, so it goes to Burst Speed. Very nice, takes this from a, well, slow spell that you can't be reactive with at all to something you can immediately use to answer enemy aggression or attacks, so very solid right there. The House Spider gets the Coral Crush Gauntlets at 12. Again, not really that impactful at all, sadly. 15, though, your Legion Saboteur gets Shadow Totem. Really solid upgrade, like to see that. 18, your Iron Legionary gets Savage Shield, so it goes from pretty aggressive stat line to just a very solid stat line that can take a lot of damage and put out a lot of damage, especially for just a 3-drop. Really makes this an incredible card. 21, your Spellslinger gets Phage, so again, just solid stat line, making it not so weak and easy to kill. At 24, your Arachnoid Sentry gets that Studded Leather. As you can see, a lot of these upgrades are just kind of increasing your deck and making them a little bit better as far as stats. Death's Hand gets Elixir of Skill at 27, and that is your last upgrade. So a lot of these are not that impactful. They're just kind of improving a little bit on the starting deck and making everything a little bit better, which, I mean, is probably how these upgrades are supposed to work. Sometimes, though, you get some crazy upgrades that completely change how some things function. But here, it's just adding little bits of improvement to everything. Very nice that, like, our Death's Hand gets 2 items on it, because it's going to be one of the most important. All right, let's move on to talk about his relics. Now, some of the best rare relics we already have equipped on him. So, Curator's Gatebreaker, -1 power, play, I strike the enemy Nexus. Now, this is good for a couple different reasons. For one, this is going to count as out of combat damage, so you're immediately dealing damage to the enemy Nexus, contributing to your level up condition. But since this will be a Nexus strike, it also triggers your effect to deal 3 damage to the enemy Nexus. So even though your power is going to be very low, you're still doing damage from that strike itself. So actually stacking up multiple Gatebreakers isn't that bad, because every hit is going to deal that extra damage. And if you play him after he's leveled, he then gets the better version where he's striking the enemy Nexus and their whole board for damage. So Gatebreaker is actually pretty good, so that's definitely a rare relic to consider. Riptide Battery, plunder, play Cannon Barrage a number of times equal to my cost. Now these Cannon Barrages, these are skills, so this will actually increase with your star powers, so this can deal a lot of damage. Very solid. You can pair it with a Gatebreaker so that it auto triggers your plunder, but even without the Gatebreaker, plunder is very easy to trigger on Swain, so you should still be able to use this without a Gatebreaker. Also, one thing to note, if you have your 6-star, this damage is going to hit every enemy unit. So not only is it scaling with your star powers, but then every one of these Cannon Barrages is going to hit the entire enemy board with his 6-star. Very powerful, especially once you get a 6-star, but even without that, still a solid relic. Dreadway Chase Gun, when summoned, create 2 warning shots in hand. These, since they're spells, will count for your star powers, so a great way to just trigger that extra damage and further increase all future damage by weakening the enemy Nexus. It's another great option that again will contribute to your level up condition. Now, while these all work out well, there's also a lot of just very basic or more generic relics that also will be fine for Swain, like Archangel Staff to refill your spell mana, The one issue is it can sometimes take a while to get Swain on the board, so that is a little bit weaker for him. Chemtech Duplicator, when you play a spell, if you have 6 or more mana gems, copy with the same targets. Swain's a 5 cost, so the next round you'll have 6 mana, so you can trigger that Chemtech Duplicator. Normally, in my experience, Swain is often able to just end the game before this would really kick in. But if you notice your games are going a little bit longer, this can be a great way to close out those matches. Luden's Tempest, all of your spells and skills deal 1 extra damage. If you want to just get, again, a little bit extra damage for your spells and skills, this is another great way to do it. We also have the Grand General's counter plan, which is actually like Swain's Relic because he is the Grand General. Round start, create a fleeting copy of me in hand. So that's just a way to get a fleeting Ravenous Flock every single round when Swain's on the board. So pretty good. It's a very versatile card that can do a lot of damage. So having this wouldn't be bad. Potentially pairing this with like an Archangel Staff if you want a little bit more way to just have Swain sit on the board generating value for you. Loose Cannon's Payload, when someone discards your hand, then create that many Pow Pows in hand. Not one I normally go with. I actually don't like this on most people other than Jinx, but it would still work since you are making these Pow Pows. Would give you a lot of damage. Not really the route I would take, but it is something you could potentially use on him. The Scourge's Stash, Plunder, I cost 2 less. Actually very solid. Now, Swain is one that you trigger plunger damage very easy, and he's also a very strong champion himself. Not only able to do a lot of damage with his Nexus Strike effects, but also gives you a crazy amount of control with being able to stun the enemy units very easily. So getting him on the board early isn't bad, and Scourge's Stash is great there. Wicked Harvest, play, deal 3 to all other units. You're normally not struggling to level up Swain, but if you want to just make sure he's leveled when you play him, could go for Wicked Harvest, as that's going to normally be a lot of damage you're doing, which very easily level him up. Let's also talk about some rare relics and what you might want to use when you're first playing him. So if you're trying to level him as fast as possible, then going for one of the Cosmic Blessings is obviously a good call. You can get these pretty easily now from some of the very first rewards from the monthly challenges, and then they're also put in a whole bunch of different bundles. So if you have these, you probably want to use those first to level him up, but that's going to be very dependent on your situation, how many of these you have, and whether or not you're wanting to use them. As far as the first common relic you want to put on Swain, especially if you don't want to do one of the XP ones, pretty much for every champion, it's the same with Swain. Starchild Staff and Chameleon's Necklace are both fantastic. Starchild Staff, game start, heal your Nexus 5. Great for getting through a lot of those early challenges when you have very low Nexus health and not a lot of sustain. This is just really, really good and a great first common relic to put on. Chameleon's Necklace, game start, create 2 copies of me in your deck. Just again, a great way to try to make sure you're actually able to play your champion. It's not quite as important for Swain since he is a 5 cost. You have a lot more time to draw him before you need to play him. So I would probably go for the Starchild Staff first, if you're not going to go for an XP relic. Lost Chapter, play, refill your spell mana. Also not bad to try to be able to play some more spells when you play Swain. Ravenous Hydra, when I'm summoned, deal 1 to all enemies. Another great way to contribute to your level up condition. So another good option for a common relic. Let's move on though and talk about the epic relics and how you really want to be playing with them. So up first, Disciple of Shadows. I cost 1 less for each ally in play, and then play, deal 3 to all other allies. This one isn't as good as it might first appear, but it can work for you based on your play style. So getting Swain on the board a little bit earlier, that's good. And then while you are killing your own units, that's not only going to deal more damage to the enemy Nexus because of your second star power, but it's also going to contribute to your level up. So great way to try to level up Swain very quickly. Echoing Spirit, game start, create 7 copies of me in your deck. Champion spells cost 1 less. Swain is a very powerful champion, so having more copies of him isn't bad. And then if you have him on the board, his champion spell is also very good, and it's going to cost nothing because it's already a 1 cost, so it going down by 1 makes it free. So not the necessarily best epic relic for him, but one that definitely can work out for you. Packed Powder, this one is actually fantastic and is one of my go-to epic relics for him. So Plunder, I cost 2 less, great for Swain. I have 1/1 for each different round you've damaged the enemy Nexus, so some good scaling. You're normally damaging the enemy Nexus every single round. So Packed Powder is absolutely fantastic for Swain. Spellweavers, this is one that you actually probably want to avoid. So power, when you gain the attack token, create a random spell that costs 2 from your regions in hand. It costs 0 and is fleeting. While Noxus does have a lot of good spells and a lot of good damaging spells, your pool of 2-drop spells isn't the best, so it's not actually going to be that helpful for you. There's not that many removal spells in that pool. So Spellweavers, sadly, not going to work out too good for you on Swain, sadly. Starforged Gauntlets, power if I'm Titanic, +1 starting mana. Now, you are very close to that Titanic threshold as it is. If you want to run Starforged Gauntlets and then just like a stat relic to get to that Titanic value for that extra starting mana, could do that. And then we have Swain's Raven Army. So this is the Swain specific relic, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's probably the best epic relic they've designed that's meant for a specific champion. So power, game start, drain 5 from the enemy nexus. So this is doing a lot for you. It's not only dealing 5 damage to the nexus, which means your star powers are now activated, because at the start of the game, your first and third star powers aren't doing anything, because they only really start doing something once the enemy nexus has taken at least 5 damage. So this is immediately dealing 5 damage that counts towards Swain's level up. It's, again, turning on your star powers. Also, it's a drain 5, so you're also healing 5 at the start of the game as well. So it kind of works as a better Star Child staff, and that is just for anyone that plays with this. Now, since this is triggering damage on the enemy nexus, it counts for plunder. So you can pair this together and play Swain round 1, which is fantastic. But play if I'm Swain, refill your spell mana. So this also functions like Lost Chapter. So this is really fun, very good. And it opens up a lot of different build opportunities for you. So if you have Swain without his 5 star power, so you don't have that extra starting mana, what you can do is go right here, double Plunder Relics, so reducing the cost of Swain by 4. So you can play Swain as a 1-drop turn 1, which is very fun with this epic relic. If you do have Swain a little bit higher though, enough that he has his extra starting mana, so he starts at 3 mana, you could actually get rid of the Scourge's stash if you want, and then throw on another solid relic, normally a rare relic. So you could go for a Gatebreaker to get that Nexus Strike effect off. This is better in lower end challenges where the enemy Nexus doesn't have as much health and they're not starting with units. So it's fine for that, but one that actually works fantastic, especially in the Swain adventure, is the Riptide Battery. Plunder play Cannon Barrage a number of times equal to my cost. So this will go off 3 times because Swain will be a 3 cost, which is actually perfect for your 3rd star power because it's then empowering your first 3 spells and skills. So this will use up all of that in your first round, and it'll actually be dealing extra damage because Swain's Raven Army has hit the enemy nexus for 5 damage. So these will be hitting harder. Really good. Normally ends up doing way more damage than the Gatebreaker. And then if you have Swain at 6 stars, remember each one of these is hitting the entire enemy board. So normally with this, even against the Swain adventure, which is very difficult, you can play Swain turn 1 and he'll just nuke the entire enemy board, and then he'll be sitting on your board leveled and just ready to go to dominate the entire rest of the game. So this is probably my favorite Swain build, especially for the Swain adventure to go with. There's plenty of other relics and combinations though for you to play around with, so I definitely recommend experimenting. These are just some of the relics I wanted to highlight for you. Now let's go take a look at what powers you might want to look out for in game, as well as support champions and cards to keep an eye out for, and finish up with his ranking. All right, so we're going to start off looking at some powers. So up first here on the left, we have Raiding Party. When you damage the enemy nexus, grant the top ally in your deck 1/1. Now this is actually the same thing you get from your 4th star power. And even if you have your 4th star power, this is still really good to pick up. Having this buff your top ally in your deck by 2/2 is fantastic. So really good common power to be able to get. Next up, Seat of Power, game start, summon a Emperor's Dais. Now, what this does is when you attack, you also attack with a ephemeral Sand Soldier. That's great, just getting some more pressure on the enemy. If they are able to hit the Nexus, they also do 1 extra damage to the Nexus as well. So great for hurting the Nexus. And it's a ephemeral unit, so that when it dies, it triggers your 2nd star power to again deal more damage to the enemy Nexus. So for a common power, it actually works out pretty well for you for Swain. Enfeebling Strike, when you damage an enemy, reduce its power by the damage dealt. This is fantastic. Like, it's already one of the best defensive powers in the game. But for Swain, you deal so much damage that you're drastically reducing down enemies' power. So good for everyone, but especially really good for you on Swain. Next up then, here on the left, Explosive Finale. This is one of the best powers for you to possibly get. When an enemy dies outside of combat, deal 4 damage to the enemy nexus. So when you're killing enemies with spells and skills and all that sort of stuff outside of combat, dealing 4 damage to the enemy nexus is incredible, because essentially what this means is every time you kill an enemy unit outside of combat, you're permanently increasing the damage of your spells. Because if you kill them, you're dealing 1 damage from your star powers, your second star power, and then you're also dealing 4 damage to the nexus, so you're totaling for 5, which then from your first and third star power is increasing the damage of all your future spells and skills. So this is absolutely fantastic. It gives you so much extra damage, and then that just gives you further damage for your spells and skills. Absolutely fantastic. Phantom Pranks, when an ally dies, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So this is a little bit more narrow version of your second star power. So if you're having fun going with that playstyle of trying to kill your own units to damage the enemy nexus, this just further doubles down on that. Elemental Winds. In the game, this is actually epic now, but still really solid. Your spells and skills deal 2 extra damage. You're all about increasing the damage anyways, so just increasing your baseline by an extra 2. Very solid for you to pick up. Last up then for powers. So sorcery, round start, refill your spell mana. Since you're playing a lot of spells, anything that's kind of going to focus on letting you do that more often is great. So sorcery here, fantastic, but also picking up some similar abilities like Spellslinger, making all your spells cost 1 less. Also pretty good. Bouncing Blades, round start, create a fleeting Blades Edge in hand. So that's the 1 cost, fast, deal 1 to anything. Pretty solid. Just having a very simple spell, because you can struggle with running out of spells and skills, and you always want to be able to trigger your star powers. So making sure you just always have a spell on hand that, as the game goes on, is going to deal more and more damage is absolutely fantastic. Great to pick up. Trifarian Might, when you summon a 5 or higher power ally, it strikes the weakest enemy. Now, this is specifically once you're able to get the raiding party for your 4th star power, because normally as you're damaging the enemy, pretty much every unit you pull out is going to be above that 5 power threshold. So it's just getting that strike off, dealing damage to enemy units. That also contributes to Swain's level up. So overall, a very solid power. Now again, there's plenty of other powers that also work out great for your Swain, especially the epic and legendaries, but I try not to showcase those too much in the guide. I want more of the commons and rares, but these are some of the powers that you definitely should look out for, but there's plenty of other awesome ones as well, so keep your eyes peeled. Moving on then, we're going to talk about support champs, and we have actually a decent amount more than we normally do. Again, though, not a exhaustive list. So up first, spells and skills, pretty simple and straightforward. Some champions, well, every time you get a support champion, they come with 2 other cards. For some champions, they come with 2 spells. So if you see that, pretty often you want to grab them, especially if you got the power, so you have Pyromantic Wake on all spells you acquire. So spells and skills, really good. Next, we have Plunder. You do a lot of Nexus damage, so anyone else that scales with Plunder works out pretty well. We also have Stuns. When your Swain is on the board and leveled, he is doing tons of stuns anywhere, so anyone that scales with stuns works out pretty well. And then last up, we have Ephemeral. Especially if you want to play around your 2nd star power, you can do a lot of damage to the enemy nexus with your Ephemeral units. So up first, we have Ezreal. He comes with 2 damaging spells, so very nice to pick him up for that. Also, Heimerdinger. Now, Heimerdinger can work in a couple different ways. For one, he comes with 2 spells, so that's really good. He also, since you can get him on the board, can drop turrets for you, which you then can use as like fodder units to also be able to kill and deal more damage. So that's also pretty solid right there. For Plunder, Gangplank is excellent. He also comes with the 0 cost warning shot, so being able to get that in your deck, also fantastic. As far as stuns, I haven't actually been able to get Yasuo to test it, sadly, but with all the stuns you're able to do, Yasuo would just annihilate the enemy board, so it should be very fun. Then as far as Ephemeral, Callista is very good. She actually comes with several spells as well, and she really benefits from all those Ephemeral units dying. So these are some support champions that I've found that work out very well for you. But again, there's plenty of other ones. but when you're evaluating your champions, these are some of the aspects you should maybe keep in mind. Next up then, some cards to look out for. So here first on the left, we have the Basilisk Bloodseeker. Now this is a pretty expensive card, but it does have a very strong skill. Deal 1 to an ally and an enemy 4 times. Now that damage is going to be able to scale with your star powers, so that's going to really be great for you, doing a ton of damage to the enemy. Now this card itself is fairly expensive, so you're probably going to want to pick this up if you get some cost reduction on it, but looking for cards that have a strong damaging skill is what you want to be looking for. Kind of the same with the Lord Broadbane. So play, deal 2 to an enemy. That damage is going to scale with your star powers. But then your fast spells, slow spells, and skills have when I damage a stunned or damaged enemy, kill it. Again, this is a fairly expensive card, so probably something you want to pick up if you can get like Horo Fluff or some cost reduction on it. But again, you're just trying to look for cards, especially units, that have a skill on them that can be able to deal some damage. Moving on then, we have Noxian Fervor, so deal 3 to an ally to deal 3 to anything. This is fantastic. It pretty much is doing the same effect as your Legionary in your deck, and it just works out really well because the damage is going to scale, so being able to use this to just directly nuke the enemy nexus, very good. Also able to level up your Swain very quickly. Avalanche, so deal 2 to all units. Fantastic. If you kill your own units, you're damaging the enemy nexus. If you kill any enemy units, you're also going to damage them from your second star power. Great way to clear the board, level up your Swain. And again, this damage will be able to scale with your star powers, so it can just function as like a board wipe, even in the toughest adventures like Lysandra later on in the game. Stylish Shot, this is a very good card to pick up. So deal 1 to the enemy nexus. The next time an ally strikes the nexus this round, create a Stylish Shot in hand. So you can keep playing this. Great way to just ping the nexus for damage, increasing all of your spell and skill damage from your star powers. So very good. As you see for most of these, I do have that Pyromantic Wake on them, just because I grabbed these screenshots after I got that power in the Constellation. Also, just getting a cheap card that has Pyromantic Wake on it, so the Stylish Shot, 1 cost, focus speed, even if it didn't have the very good effect of dealing damage to the enemy nexus, still necessarily wouldn't be bad to pick that up, because very cheap way to just ping the enemy nexus for damage. Really, really solid. Let's finish up with the rankings. So before level 20, he's a solid A tier champion. After level 20, especially for this, I'm not really considering his like 6th star power, because I feel like pretty much everyone with his 6 star power is probably gonna be like S tier. But after level 20, with his like normal just 3 star powers, I think he's still a tier champion. Now, as far as his pros, you have absolutely crazy damage, great control, especially once you get Swain on the board. Very good. As far as some cons, you have some lack of draw and card generation. Now, this does get mitigated later on when you have all the upgrades for your cards. You have some draw and card generation there, but especially when you're leveling and you don't have the Constellation filled out, don't have them at level 30, you're really going to feel that lack of draw. So just know if you're leveling Swain, that is going to be an issue, something you do want to mitigate. And then the lack of sustain, you don't have really any sustain built into your deck at all. So that can be something to pay attention to, especially for the Swain adventure. As far as the regional ranking, he's the only Noxus champion I have at the 6 stars. Now, he seems like he's going to be the best. The other 2 that are coming to mind is Darius as well as Samira. But again, I don't have either of them at their 6 stars, so can't judge it as fairly. But I think at the moment, he's probably the best for the Noxian region. But again, take that with a little bit of salt. That's it for the Swain guide, though. I've had an absolutely blast playing this champion. He's actually probably one of my new favorite champions added to the game. If this guide helped you out, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.